All right. Hello, hello. This is Dr. Randy here with Restore the Real. And today I have a really special guest, someone that I met at a eco conference about 8 months ago. And actually reached out to him because another friend, mentor of mine said, hey, you should go talk to Sachin about this. And what I remember about that initial conversation was just the humility and the love that I felt from you. And then we went to lunch, and it was just a beautiful conversation. And I took so much value from it. But to give you all a little bit insight into Sachin, Dr. Sachin Patel is a dad, a husband, and what he calls a lifestyle practitioner. That he's really helping people improve the quality of their life in so many different ways, in so many beautiful ways. And today we're going to talk about something very simple that we've done since the moment we were born, and that is breath. So, Sachin, welcome. Thank you for being here.
It is my absolute honor. I so appreciate this opportunity, and I'm looking forward to our conversation today. Thank you.
Yeah. So, in a webinar that you talked about breath as a technology. And we look at breath, we're like, well, I just breathe. Like, really, what else is there? But why do you call it a technology?
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful question. So I think of it as a technology because, like most technologies, they have dormant potentials that we're completely unaware of. Take your phone, for example. That same phone in an average user or beginner user's hand is a phone. Maybe it plays music, maybe it takes pictures. But that same phone in somebody else's hands who understands how the technology works can make an entire movie with that phone, can record an entire podcast, can run an entire business because they understand the power of that technology and how to unlock it. So, breath, in my opinion, is technology. It is an embodiment of intelligence that is woven into our body because the reason we breathe and the function that breathing creates, correct breathing, especially in our bodies, helps you understand that our maker or whatever we believe in, our designer, or whether we're just a series of random events that created this amazing body, once you start realizing how sophisticated that process of breathing is, and yet how simple it is, you understand that this is once understood, can be a technological breakthrough for people in terms of how they use their body, right? I believe that the greatest technology ever created is the human body. And the steering wheel of the body, in my opinion, is the breath, because the breath controls the entire nervous system. And so when we can understand that and start tapping into it and lean into it, using that framework, we start understanding that at our fingertips and literally right under our nose is the answer to many of our chronic health challenges. And certainly when we breathe correctly, it's going to improve the outcomes of whatever health quest we're on.
I love the example that you gave because, again, many don't think as breath as a technology, but the example of the phone, right? I can just take pictures or talk, or I can run a whole organization and make movies and that sort of stuff. And with breathing, it's so true. We can create states within ourself of panic, of love, of peace with just simply our breath, which is phenomenal and beautiful. And I think also when we think of our creation in the Bible, it mentions that um, like air was breathed into the nostrils of of Adam and Eve. It wasn't the mouth. It wasn't some other way. It was in through the nose.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Before we get into things, when in your path did you start to see and find breath as this technology and a tool?
Well, I would say, like probably most people, I've been exposed to the idea of breathing, either from television, right? You see somebody having a panic attack and they start breathing into a paper bag, right? That's
Right.
like, so we get exposed that way. So I always understood that, hey, if anyone's ever experiencing a panic attack, then the breath is the first thing that they can use to help calm themselves down. Of course, you wouldn't have somebody breathe into a paper bag like that. But so that's probably my initial exposure. And then being Indian, chanting and prayer and meditation, all of that incorporates breath. And then in chiropractic school, we talk about breath and breathing, but it's just like you gloss over it, right? It's
Yeah.
never explained to you as a tool that you can use to alter your state or to help your body in facilitating a specific response. And then, as a chiropractor, we did a lot of soft tissue work, structural work, and we paid attention to the diaphragm maybe, but probably not in the way I pay attention to it now. And then as a functional medicine practitioner, we learn all about cellular respiration and mitochondria and energy production, but nobody ever really talks about breathing. It's like one of those systems in our body that very rarely gets discussed. When you think about functional medicine, we think of the liver, we think of digestion, we think of brain function, but it's pretty rare that somebody talks about breathing. But breathing, as hopefully I'll be able to convey today, is essentially the thing that we can consciously do every single day that allows us to override certain processes in our body and utilize our breath to create a favorable internal environment and external environment.
It's
So
cool.
for me, I learned about breathing. My first experience with breathing was at a Wim Hof training. So this was in about 2018. So about 5 years ago, I went to a Wim Hof training, and we did cold exposure, we did breath holds. It was a pretty magical experience. And by the end of it, I was able to hold my breath for about 3.5 minutes, which I thought
Wow.
was kind of cool to be able to do that. I never even
Right.
tried anything like that. And to be able to do it was pretty profound. And a few years later, fast forward a few years later, the same person who introduced me to Wim Hof took me through a 90-minute breathing session. And in that 90-minute breathing session, I started experiencing altered states of consciousness. I started experiencing, very vividly my past experiences in life. I went back to my first breath and got to re-experience what that was like with my parents holding me in their arms. So it was pretty cool to be able to, you know, um, have these amazing kind of supernatural type experiences with my breath. And then I learned about James Nestor's book, Breath, uh, because right around the same time, my son was facing some dental challenges and his teeth were being overcrowded. So serendipitously, James was speaking at an event that I was part of, and I heard him speak, and I realized that my son didn't need the orthodontic work that was being recommended to him. What he needed to do was actually open up and widen his palate. And then after a little investigation on our end, we learned that he was a mouth breather. And because of that, that was changing and altering his facial structure. And the solution that most dentists provide are to pull the teeth. But the
Right.
problem with that is that it creates a narrow airway. So structurally studying his face, I realized very quickly that, yeah, pulling teeth doesn't make sense. What can we do to get his upper palate to form correctly? Part of that was having an appliance installed to widen the palate, but also getting him to learn how to become a nasal breather instead of a mouth breather. So that's a little bit about where my journey starts. I know a long answer to your question, but hopefully that helps people understand that it's been part of my life in so many different ways, but it's also played a role, now it plays a role in our practice clinically because it's something that we incorporate into how we work with our patients.
I think something that, I mean, there are many things that I want to ask on, but I think where I would like to maybe start is with, your son, your boy, because I I know that I have 5 kids, and as they've been to the dentist and have had some teeth pulled, I had wisdom teeth pulled, right? I hear this thing that, oh, our mouths are just getting more narrow, and that, it's just hereditary, and it's just kind of how things are. There's really no reason for it other than it's just like how people are evolving. But as I'm reading, I'm finding that no, this isn't actually true. There are mechanisms behind the foods that we eat, what we do, that are contributing to a more narrow jaw
Mhm.
and restricted airways. So, can you speak to that? Like, I don't believe this is hereditary, and why? But why do we see this narrowing of the jaw and more breathing problems with people?
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the things that's important for people to understand is that form affects function and function affects form. So, a few things that have happened over the last few centuries. that have altered our facial structure. One is that we tend to over mechanically process food. So, for example, eating a salad and drinking a vegetable smoothie are two completely different things. While the nutritional value might be the same, the stimulation that that food provides is very different. So, for example, if you're chewing something, then chewing something increases the density of your jaw. It also causes an expansion of your jaw, and that causes a broadening of your airway. You know, the average hunter gatherer used to chew 4 hours a day. And now you're lucky if a person barely even chews their food, right?
Right.
And you think about children, you know, most of the foods that they are eating are pureed. So they're not even really chewing. There's no effort involved and no chewing involved in actually consuming that food. So soft foods like yogurt, smoothies, pureed vegetables, oatmeal, rice, there's literally very little stimulation taking place to the jaw. And that changes the structure of the jaw. The other reason that we're seeing is because of the way people breathe. So children, if they don't breathe with their tongue in the roof of the mouth, then there's nothing pushing their upper palate outwards. So when the tongue, if they're open mouth breathers, or if their tongue sits in the bottom of their mouth, maybe they have a tongue tie or something like that, then as a result of that, there's nothing pushing the upper palate outwards. So we actually have built-in braces. We have our tongue, which
Mhm.
pushes our jaw, our airway outwards and forward, and our upper palate, and we also have our lips that keep our, jaws in place or keep our teeth in nice shape and form. What's interesting, Randy, is that a question I always ask people is, when you give a child a toothbrush for the first time, do they automatically start brushing their teeth or do they chew the brush?
They generally chew, and I've got to share this. When I first heard you say this, and I'll let you go on, but I'm like, quit chewing on the toothbrush, just brush your teeth. And then I listened to you, and I'm like, oh man, I'm like, what have I done? So go ahead, sorry, continue. They chew it.
Yeah, they chew it because intuitively that's what they should know to do. So I'll tell you a story. I'll tell everyone here a story. My parents, we never had braces growing up, and I was always kind of like, I don't want to say jealous of people who had braces, but I was always envious of people who had braces because I'm like, oh my god, these people are going to have these perfect teeth, right? And uh, and so my parents were like, well, we never had braces. Like my parents never had braces, grandparents never had braces, none of their uncles had braces. They all had perfect teeth, and they didn't even have a dentist, right? So like no cavities, no nothing, and they've got a beautiful smile. And I'm like, how is that possible? That doesn't make any sense. Here, everyone here is getting braces. What gives? So when we were young, we went to India, and in India, what they would do, and they still might do it in some villages, but of course, India's become more westernized now, is every week somebody would come on and drop off a bunch of branches, and they'd be cut about the length of a toothbrush. And oftentimes it would be a tree like neem tree branches. And what they would do is they would chew on the branch. So that's stimulating their teeth, stimulating their jaw. Okay. So they're chewing on the branch, which is causing the oils from the branch to be released, nourishing their oral microbiome, like cleansing and deplaquing. And then they would bristleize the end of that twig, and then they would brush their teeth with it. So this process, also known as miswak in Arabic cultures, they use this as well, is very excellent for dental health and jaw health and jaw structure. So, it seems barbaric when you think about it. Like, look at these people. Like, what do they know, right? They're chewing
Right.
on this stick. But the stimulus of that was so beneficial to their jaw formation and the health of their dentition as well.
That's really fascinating, and how like impactful that is for not just that age, but then for life, because of the importance of their ability to breathe, the states that can create, just the health benefit of that. So I really appreciate you sharing that. So parents, let your kids chew on their toothbrush. Don't be like me and try to just force them to brush their teeth. Let them chew. Um, what are some of the other health benefits? So we get into this whole oral cavity and how breathing, chewing, it's essential to help expand that palate. Um, but mouth breathing also, it has a big effect on our actual nasal pathway, right?
Hmm.
It can close that and compress that.
Yeah. So I want to go back just like maybe 30 seconds, just so we're clear to our listeners that I don't think you're recommending that children chew their plastic toothbrushes either. Uh,
Right.
so
Yeah.
there is an alternative if you want them to chew on something, because that'll take us into the next leg of our conversation. You can actually get silicone chewing blocks. So these are chewing blocks that you put in the back of your mouth, and they come in different densities. So you can start off um, with one that's a little bit easier, and then you can build up as your jaw gets stronger and stronger. And so for men, this is great. It helps create a nice, healthy jawline, but it also will help with expanding the jaw as well. So it's a great stimulus, and it also helps with changing our facial structure as well.
Now, is that like I've seen some of these chewing blocks where it seems to be all the front of the mouth, but it sounds like what you're saying is there are some that are actually for the more for the back of the mouth. Is that
Yeah.
right?
Yep. So there's ones,
Yeah.
so the ones I have sit in the back of my mouth. So they just sit in the back of the molars.
Okay. Cool. Um, and I think, and then the benefit of that is that that masseter muscle is super important. And I've read that even with bone density, that as we age, right, it's known that we lose bone, but in the facial structure, it seems to be lost fairly quickly as we age, and that we can actually regain some of that bone health just through chewing.
Yeah, it's like most things in our body, right? If you don't use it, you lose it. So
Right.
it's so critical that we continue to practice the practice of chewing. And we've become a society where we're not doing any of the hard work to get that food on the table like we used to. And that isn't to that isn't to say that people aren't working hard, but we're not often the ones farming and bringing the food onto the table.
Right.
So we take for granted what that process is like. And a lot of times, because of that, we don't fully appreciate every bite that we're taking of that meal that we're having. And we may not fully understand the importance of something like chewing our food. I mean, chewing our food isn't just good for our jaw, it's also good for digestion because it helps increase the surface area of the food, helps mix that food up with our saliva, helps us taste that food so that our nervous system is prepared and creates the right enzyme concoction for us to digest that meal. It's so crucial for people to do that. And here's another thing: chewing increases oxygenation to the brain. It helps us feel more full. It helps us appreciate the meal that we're having, taste it. If it's a delicious meal, you want to chew it more because it tastes good and you're extracting more of the flavor that way as well. So it's one simple thing that we do, but it creates such a huge domino effect in our overall health.
It's so cool. And I love that you say that because when you think of taking a moment even before you eat, right? Prayer, giving thanks, whatever that might be. And then, as you said, as you're chewing, like appreciating the experience, tasting the flavors, being aware of the flavors, and what a role each of those actually do play. I think it's so easy to just get food, start eating, not even really think about it, and not even the physical side, but just the spiritual side of that,
Hmm.
of the process and the enjoyment and the beauty that's all around that is that for the soul is so enlivening, and I think it helps us even align with our creator and align with probably each other too because of the energy that we're going to have as a result of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think being present to our food is such an important part of how we nourish our body, right? And speaking of food and consumption and intake, interesting fact about breathing is that we consume 30 pounds of air each day,
That's a
which
ton.
which is kind of crazy when you think about it, right? It seems like it's something invisible. We don't see it. It flows in and out of us, but it's 30 pounds every single day on average, versus 2 to 3 pounds of food that we consume. So, we got to look at all the different aspects of what's going in, what's coming out of our body. And what's really cool is how the wind, how breath shapes us. There's most people don't know this. I didn't know this until recently, but here in Ontario, Canada, where I live, there used to be mountains that were higher than Mount Everest.
Wow.
So think
Wow.
about that.
No
Higher
idea.
than Mount Everest. So the tallest mountains in the world were actually here in Ontario. And if you come to Ontario, it looks completely flat because of what the wind has done. The wind over billions of years has shaved these mountain downs into rolling hills. You would never guess that there were mountains here. So the breath, the wind is powerful because it's so persistent, and it's the thing that we do every single day 23,000 times that we can take conscious control over. And so I know I want to close the loop to the question that you asked about how we breathe changes our facial structure and our airway, and why breathing through the nose and why breathing through the mouth are two vastly different things. Is that cool if we shift into that
Yeah, yeah,
question?
absolutely.
So we have two orifices, right, that we can breathe in from, and as you mentioned from the biblical scriptures, that the breath went in through the nostril. There's a significance to that. As we all probably know, the mouth is the dirtiest part of the body. So anytime we breathe in through our mouth, whatever the outdoor quality of the air is, we're making it worse by having the air go through our mouth, because now we're inhaling all that bacteria. So our nervous system and our immune system stays in fight or flight when we breathe through our mouth. And I'll explain why in a moment. And that makes total sense. And our immune system stays on high alert because all these pathogens, microscopic pathogens, are being inhaled with every single breath that we take. When we breathe through our mouth, we also dehydrate our mouth and dry out our saliva. And our saliva is actually very protective, and that helps produce a healthy microbiome, but it also helps reduce plaquing. One of my clients recently started mouth taping, and she went for her, biannual checkup with her dentist, and the dentist said, "What the heck have you been doing?" And the big two changes that she made is she started mouth taping and tongue scraping, and that changed her oral microbiome. And the oral microbiome is self-preserving, right? Which means that we technically don't need to brush our teeth, right? If you've got a healthy oral microbiome, it sounds kind of weird and gross when you think about it, right? But animals don't have toothbrushes.
Right.
Or how do they keep their teeth their entire life? Like us humans, our teeth are falling out of our face when we're 50 and 60 years old, but these animals who have no dentist, no nothing, right, don't even have a toothbrush, and they have their teeth lasting them their entire lifetime. So it kind of begs the question, like, what are we doing wrong, or what could we be doing better or different? And so when we breathe through our mouth, the air gets dirtier, the saliva gets dry. But here's another thing that happens: when we dry out that saliva, it kills the oral microbiome. It also makes us more prone to things like bad breath. So then people use things like mouthwash, right? Or other things that further kill the oral microbiome. And the significance of that is the oral microbiome creates the right environment to protect our teeth from dental caries and other issues, but it also produces something called nitric oxide. And nitric oxide helps with lowering blood pressure, helps by it's also part of our immune defense. It kills viruses and bacteria on contact, and it also helps increase microcirculation. So by simply breathing correctly, we also now start directly affecting blood flow and circulation, sexual function, because nitric oxide helps with microcirculation, and we start directly affecting cognition and blood pressure. So breathing through our nose has many benefits. So just like it's almost like the opposite. So when we breathe through our nose, what ends up happening is we actually purify the air. We temperature regulate the air, we moisture regulate the air, we pressure regulate the air, and we cleanse the air. So the air is perfected when it goes through our nose, as opposed to being infected, so to speak,
Right.
when it goes through our mouth. So when we breathe in through our nose, we actually get 20% more oxygen because the air is more pressurized. And because of that, we have more cleansing breaths as well. So one of the keys to breathing, Doc, is that just like most people overeat, most people overbreathe. So we
Okay.
actually breathe too much. In yogic philosophy and Eastern medicine, one of the best ways to improve longevity is to slow down your breath. And
Yeah.
this,
And I want to go back just one thing. I think the beauty in what you described, mouth breathing versus nasal breathing, um, there's intention in how we've been created, right? And I think that what you described is so amazing of all the structures that are needed to allow us to consume the oxygen necessary, but to have it cleansed. And just the wording that you said, like to have that perfect air enter our body as opposed to that imperfect air that then can lead to disease and overstimulation of the nervous system or the sympathetic state. I really think that's it's beautiful to me. That's a really neat idea, and just yeah, I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, thank you. It's like an easy juxtaposition, right?
Yeah,
When you can see it that way, then you're like, oh my God, it makes total sense from a, from a gross anatomy level. It
yeah,
makes sense from a micro anatomy and microscopic and microbiotic level. And it makes sense from a structural level. So it kind of checks off all the boxes. And if I digress for just a minute, like for me, I've always been searching for the zenith of simplicity and sophistication. So Da Vinci said that the greatest sign of sophistication is simplicity. And so that's always been one of my mantras in both business, but also in helping people get healthy, is that if the body's the most sophisticated instrument or technology that I'm aware of, then it must also be simple to take care of. Because if it was complicated to take care of, then it wouldn't be sophisticated. It would be clunky. It would be awkward, right? But the body's beautiful. It's perfect, right? It's built in the image of perfection. So then, I think of all of us like supercars, and every supercar requires a driver that knows what they're doing, but the driver has to have the right steering wheel and the brakes and the pedals. So what is that steering wheel, right? That's controlling the entire physicality of the car. And for humans, it's the breath. The breath is the steering wheel. And once we look at it that way, then we realize that the cadence and the depth and the nostril that we breathe through and all those things now becomes part of that steering wheel, brake, and accelerator. And now we can, lean into our breath or become self-aware of our breath and simply match our breath with whatever goal we're trying to accomplish. So just like you would match your steering with the road ahead of you, you match your breath with what's happening in the moment. So if I need to be calm, I have a calm breathing pattern. If I need to be excited and create energy, then I can breathe in a specific way. And what's really interesting that I found, and when I explain this to people, it's just, it seems very common sense, right? And it's just very intuitive. So our body is very interesting because and here's going back to the question you asked at the beginning about technology. So when our emotional state changes, our breath is actually one of the first thing that changes. So think about this. If a lion walked into the room, instantly you would gasp,
yeah,
right? And that gasp, what that does is it causes a rapid expansion of your lungs, and that rapid expansion squeezes your heart. So now you instantly increase blood pressure, right? So the breath is already assisting the cardiovascular system in responding to fight or flight so that you could run away from whatever is chasing you. When we feel a sense of relief, what do? We sigh, right?
yeah,
When we when we are crying, that's a breathing signature. When we're laughing, that's a breathing signature. So the emotion changes the breath. But this is actually a two-way street. So we can use the breath to actually create the emotion. So I could start breathing a certain way to start increasing my fight or flight response, right? I could do something called yogic coffee, or it's also known as bellows breath. And within seconds, I can increase my heart rate and my blood pressure, just as I would if I was having a fight or flight response from an outside force. So we can have outside forces shape our breath, or we can use our breath to shape what's happening inside of us. For example, if I want to lower my blood pressure, I do the exact opposite. So I would take, nice slow breaths in, but I would take long exhales out, right? And that would put me in a more parasympathetic state and naturally lower my blood pressure. So we have breathing signatures that can create emotional states in our body. And so it is a two-way street. Once you can tap into that technology, which is super easy,
yeah,
then you can change how you feel within seconds. So a great example is sighing. So when you feel a sense of relief, you sigh, and you might, right? It's just like a general sigh. But if you wanted to actually create the feeling of relief in your body, then you can exaggerate to sigh, right? You can take a super deep breath in, you can hold it at the top, you can pack a little bit more air in, and then you could let it out with a loud, audible sigh and kind of feel the release in your entire body. And you do that 4 or 5 times, and I promise you, usually by the third one, you're feeling like a completely different person. So the impact can also be very quick. It doesn't take long to change our emotional state when we change our breathing pattern.
You know what's really cool about you share that is this past week I was talking with someone who's always um, does this heightened stress, worry, fear, all that, and I just kind of stopped our conversation and I said, "Hey, we're going to do some breath work," and and so we did this slower breathing, and I had her hum on the exhale, and I think we did this like 4 or 5 times. And when we finished, it didn't take that long, but when we finished, I said, "Okay, what do you feel right now?" And she just talked about just this sense of calm and peace. And she's like, "I never feel this way." And I didn't think to say, well, maybe we should like repattern your breathing or really focus on that. I didn't say that. Now that you're speaking this, it's like, yeah, this is a tool that we can use to help ourselves at any moment if we just have the awareness to know where are we emotionally, from a stress state or I need some energy, I need life into me. There's so many things we can do just with breath if we just know it.
Yeah, it's like I don't know if you've ever been to an amusement park where they have these cars. They have this place called Canada's Wonderland here in Toronto, and I remember this was like my favorite ride because you could actually steer the car, and there's a track in the middle, so the car stays
Amazing.
within the track, so you're steering it, and it's actually moving, but it never goes off that midline. And so breathing is kind of the same way, right? We could breathe unconsciously throughout the day. We're going to live, we're going to strive. Like, I mean, we're not going to strive, sorry. We're going to live, we're going to survive. Just like that car, it's going to fumble its way along the track. It's going to be a bumpy ride. But if we can grab the steering wheel and pay attention to the road that's in front of us, then we can always ask ourselves, is my breath matching the way I want to feel? Because if we're breathing unconsciously, then chances are we go to our default setting. So if our default setting is fight or flight, which it is for some people because of everything that's going on in their life, then we fall to that setting. And our breath then kind of falls into that setting. But we can always grab the steering wheel. We can always become aware of our breath, slow it down if we want to feel calm, speed it up if we want to excite ourselves. And then we can get very specific with what nostril we breathe in and out of, the cadence that we breathe in and out of, whether we breathe in through our nose and out through our mouth, or sometimes we might even breathe in and out through our mouth if we're trying to create an effect. The humming, as you mentioned, is a great way to increase nitric oxide. What it also does is it lengthens the exhale. So people start shifting into a more parasympathetic state. And it can happen very rapidly. And one thing I would encourage all of us to focus on is not just taking those moments out of the day where, we're taking 5 minutes out of the day to breathe. Certainly keep doing that. But how are you breathing the rest of the day? Right? Check in there. So the average person picks up their phone a couple hundred times a day. And so what I encourage people to do is simply make it a habit that every time you think of your phone, you think of your breath next, right? So even if you're about to pick up your phone, okay,
Yeah.
let me check into my breath. So now immediately we're checking in on ourselves a couple hundred times a day. Just like if you're driving for 8 hours, right, you're going to check in on the steering wheel, periodically just to make sure you're staying the course.
And I wonder that just brings up something different. I don't necessarily want to go on that path, but if we do think about our breath every time we go to reach our phone, then maybe there wouldn't be a need to go pick up the phone. That it would be this change within us that we don't need a distraction or a dopamine hit, but actually our breath is cleansing us internally and helping to create the internal environment that we need such that, oh, I don't need this hit now. That's
Right.
really I am gonna be more intentional about that and just see what that does over the next, just today, tomorrow. I really want to be more intentional about that and see what it changes internally. I think I love what you just shared.
Yeah,
So
I'll have you report back to me. Let me know how that goes.
yeah,
I think we're always looking for something to do, right?
yes, yep,
And what better thing to do than to breathe? I mean, we're already doing it. Now we can do it with more consciousness and awareness. I'll share a quick story with you. One of my friends is traveling across Antarctica, and it's about a 120-day trip. He's got to lug a 400-pound sled with him with all of his food, his equipment, his tent. It's a solo trip, so nobody else is going with him. And the only thing he has is him and his breath. So we were going over different various breathing techniques to that he can use in times of crisis, in times of
hmm,
problem solving, in times of temperature regulation. If he needs to cool himself down, heat himself up, increase peripheral circulation, like all of those things, we're giving him a technology that he's already going to take with him. Right? It's not going to add any weight to his sled because he's already
right.
taking his breath with him. But now he's going to be able to use it as a tool when he needs it. And so it's one of those things that if we just bring it to our awareness, bring it to our attention. It sounds so uh, embarrassingly simple, right? It's just like, how could it be this simple? And that's exactly what we want. We don't want the answer to be complicated. We want the answer to be simple. But when it's presented to us, sometimes we can dismiss it. However, when we think about something like breathing, I tell people, listen, give me 5 minutes and I'll show you how important breathing is, right? Just hold your breath and let's see how far we get with that, right? So you'll know right
Right.
away, you'll know how important it is, right? When you stop breathing. You also know how important it is when you start breathing correctly, right? Just like if there was a good driver, you can tell when somebody's a good driver and when somebody isn't, right?
Yeah.
Same piece of equipment, same car, but a different experience for the passengers. The thing with breathing is that we do it from the moment we're born till the moment we die, but it's very rarely discussed. So it's very rarely mastered by people. But it's the portal that we have to, spiritual experiences, but also day-to-day experiences can be optimized by optimizing the way we breathe.
You alluded to something a few minutes ago, that I wanted to ask about. You said that in today's society, we're probably breathing too much and that we need to slow that down. Can you expand on that? Like breathing too much, slowing that down. What is the benefit of? I mean, we've already addressed a few things, but to be very specific on that, in what ways are we breathing too much, and then why do we need to slow that down, and how do we do that? Are there seconds in, seconds out that we should be focused on, or holds, or what kind of things would you advise people on that to do?
Yeah, great question. So, I think that when we talk about breathing from what is normal breathing throughout the day, there is a pattern that I like to sink into, and it feels very weird when you first start breathing this way because you start realizing how much people are breathing. The average person breathes, when they're sleeping, 15 to 20 times per minute, and that's when they're breathing unconsciously. However, what we can do is, as conscious breathers, we can slow that down. So the breathing pattern that I like to sink into most of my day is called coherence breathing, and that's about 6 seconds in, 6 seconds out. And so we can practice that right now for a couple rounds, and you'll see how different it is than the pace that most people are breathing. So we'll let the air all the way out, gentle exhale. And now let's breathe in for 6 seconds. So inhale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Inhale, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that's the breath that I'm in most of the day. Whenever I'm consciously aware, I'm going back to that breathing pattern. When you breathe this way, your heart and brain are going to be more connected. And the Heart Math Institute has done a lot of research on this. This breathing pattern also increases oxygenation to the brain. So your thinking is going to become a lot more clear as well. The reason we slow down our breathing, and the reason I say that people overbreathe, and James Nestor would agree with this as well, as would many other breathing experts, is that we only absorb about 25% of the oxygen with each breath that we take. So if we slow down our breathing, it's not going to compromise oxygen delivery, which is one of the primary reasons we breathe. And the other thing that happens when we slow down our breathing is we become more tolerant to CO2. So the urge to breathe actually doesn't come from needing more oxygen. The urge to breathe comes from being intolerant to CO2. Now, what's interesting is that as CO2 levels increase in our body, we get more oxygen delivery to the cells. So breathing less actually delivers more oxygen to your tissue. So it seems very counterintuitive, right? But you're actually going to get more efficient oxygen delivery when you breathe slower.
So is there more of like a saturation to that, where you're allowing your lungs, your cells, your tissues, the blood, I mean, I should say the lungs, the blood vessels to like saturate more with that oxygen? Is that kind of what is happening, or is it different?
Well, there's always exchange taking place in the alveoli, right, as the
Right.
blood is flowing through. So there's all this oxygen that is normally just exhaled and expired when we breathe out that doesn't get captured. So if we slow down our breathing, we're going to actually get more of that oxygen to onboard the red blood cells in the alveoli.
And then that's cool. And then I also, as I was reading his book and he was talking about CO2 tolerance, it's like this thought of, oh, I have too much. I need to get this out. But really, what you're saying and what I think I've understood from him is as we have more CO2 concentration, we actually can use oxygen more effectively. Is that
Right.
right?
Yep. It's
Which is
called
which is
it's very paradoxical
right.
because you would think you need more, right, to get more oxygen. But we breathe in so much oxygen as a concentration of the air that we breathe in that there's so much there that we can't absorb it all in one regular, normal, unconscious breath. But when we slow down our breath, that oxygen is being, onboarded to the red blood cells, and the CO2 concentration is now increasing in our body. And this is happening ever so slightly, but also ever so quickly. And that CO2 concentration, because it's going up, it's telling our body to dump more oxygen to the tissue. It's saying, we don't know when that next breath is coming, so dump more oxygen, right? So it's almost like a self-preservation technology, if you will.
That's cool. I have to say, just in doing that quick breath work that you had people do, and if you didn't do this while you were doing that 6 second in, 6 second out, go back and do that again. As I was doing that, there was just more of this calmness that came, right? And as you talked about getting into this coherence, our brain and our heart, we're always taught if we get more into our heart, then we're going to find and know our path. And when our brain, there's so much that's just there, right?
Mhm.
And so, what a great way to use breath to really find, I think, ourselves, to find our path, to know that, to live that, to walk by that, and there's so many levels of what breathing does for us
Yeah,
and how it
I
impacts our body. It's really amazing.
yeah, I want to share a couple more things because I think these will be really valuable to people.
Yeah.
And really, I should say this too, that I think we're uh, just scratching the surface of this conversation. I'm personally scratching the surface of the ocean of breathing because it's something that I just keep learning more and more fascinating things, and I'm grateful to be able to explain it in a way that hopefully opens up people's eyes and opens up their nostrils, so to speak, so they incorporated this into their life. But breathing is one of those things that goes beyond just oxygenating our cells, right? So yes, we need oxygen. Yes, that happens to be in the mitochondria, right? We need it to create energy and ATP in our body. But the other thing that happens when we breathe correctly is that breathing is also part of our respiratory and cardiovascular system, right? They work together. So with each breath that we take, we're assisting the heart in pumping blood. The diaphragm is known as the second heart. As a diaphragm moves up and down, and as the lungs expand and contract, the heart is getting hugged with every breath that we take. The other thing that happens is as a diaphragm moves up and down, it's acting like a piston. So it's gently massaging our internal organs. It's helping the digestive organs with peristalsis, is squeezing the lymph out of the organs. Some of the biggest lymph nodes in our body are actually underneath our diaphragm. So
Right.
our designer, said that, hey, like if you're going to breathe and you need to breathe to live, then I'm going to make sure that that one thing that you do has 1,000 other benefits to you if you do it correctly. So when we breathe correctly, our heart has to work. It's less work for our heart. When we breathe correctly, we increase nitric oxide, which helps blood flow through our blood vessels much more efficiently. When we breathe through our nose, we also regulate our fluids much better. Mouth breathing acts as a diuretic, it actually dehydrates us. When we breathe correctly, we move the lymph from our trunk organs, we assist in peristalsis, we assist in proper elimination and detoxification. When we breathe correctly, we regulate our nervous system. When we breathe correctly, we oxygenate our tissues. When we breathe correctly, we have the ability to control our emotional state, right? So think about this one technology, as I describe it, can impact so many things. And it's happening. I mean, whether you like it or not, these things are happening inside of you because of your breath. But if you want to take control of those aspects of your health, then guess what? You're literally one breath away from being able to do that.
I listened to, I think this was in James Nestor's book, but he said that many in the Indian culture, Buddhist culture, they don't look at the number of days they have, but the number of breaths. And that, it's like use each one intentionally with purpose, because, there's power in that.
Yeah.
Um, you also shared something that breathing really is longevity, right? That there is the greater lung capacity that we have, the greater our longevity is.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so easy to want to look, as you said, for more complex things that aren't so simple. What do I have to take or do? But in terms of longevity and how the lungs are, and the diaphragm is this pump that is helping to, I guess we could say, detox our body as well. Most of our listeners know what that means, but
Mm-hmm.
if you're not focused on breathing, then can any of the things that you're taking or doing be as effective without this? I mean, this seems like, if we talk about foundational things and root cause things, is there anything more foundational than breath? And shouldn't we start there as opposed to with other procedures, with other supplementation, with other tools, devices, red light, sauna, right? I mean, breathing should be the number one thing we start with.
Yeah, here's I love everything that we're talking about, and I love how you're adding so much to the to the pool, because it's just getting my brain spinning as well. So I'm loving our conversation. One thing to also note is that we regulate our blood pH with our lungs as well. So
Right.
that's another thing to keep in mind. And of course, we detox through the lungs. For every 10 pounds that we lose, 8.4 of them is through the lungs, because a byproduct of cellular respiration in the mitochondria is water and carbon dioxide. I do want to also mention, how we breathe at night makes a huge impact on our health. And I know you talked about mouth taping with your children. I talk about mouth taping with my son and with our clients. And so it's not just how we breathe during the day that's important, but also how we breathe at night plays a huge role in our capability of healing as well. Because sleeping is one of the most parasympathetic things that we do. And so if we're at rest, we're repairing, we're regenerating and restoring our bodies. But if our breathing is fight or flight type of breathing, right? Dysfunctional nighttime breathing is prevalent. About 65 percent of people sleep with their mouth open at night, and that has a whole cascade of effects, like what we talked about today. And so if we can just get people to understand how they breathe at night plays a huge role in how they feel the next day and the choices they make and all that good stuff, then something as simple as mouth taping can have a huge and profound effect on people's health. In fact, not to get too far off on a tangent, but people who breathe through their mouth actually require more sugar to taste sweetness. So
Hmm.
the threshold for their taste buds actually changes based on whether they're breathing through their mouth or through their nose as well. So imagine waking up in the morning feeling more tired than when you went to sleep, right? Your mouth is dry. Perhaps you woke up a couple of times to use the bathroom because mouth breathing is a diuretic, and now you're thirsty, you're hungry, right? You're angry, all these things because you had and you have high blood sugar. I mean, all those things because of the dysfunctional breathing at night. This is why people will oftentimes check their blood sugar in the morning and it's high. They'll check their blood pressure in the morning while they're just waking up and it's high because of the way they were breathing while they were sleeping.
I'm so glad you brought that up. It's so interesting. There are some patients that I have that I'm like, man, I don't get it. I don't understand why your glucose is so elevated in the morning. I mean, everything else seems to be going well, but I haven't checked in on their breathing. And again, I am just getting into this as you share with such humility, like you're just scratching the surface. I feel that maybe I haven't even done the scratching yet. I'm just kind of looking at the surface and being like, okay, what? How do I get into here? Um, but yeah, there's so many things that as we're talking, I'm thinking of different people that I interact with, and like, oh my gosh, we're missing the most foundational piece to existence, and it is so simple and beautiful that it is that simple.
Mm-hmm.
So
There's a great app that I can encourage people to download. It's called Snore Lab. And
okay,
what Snore Lab does is it records you while you're sleeping. And this could be a great exercise, doc, for you to give to your patients. It's a good thing for everyone to do,
yeah,
whether they have these challenges or not, just to see how their nighttime respiration is. Are they snoring? Do they have apnea? What other challenges do they have? Because if they don't fix those, they're never going to feel their absolute best, which is I know what they want and what you want for them as well.
right. What are some so Snore Lab? It's an app that's cool. I'm going to take a look at that. What are some things that people can do? I mean, we've talked about slowing the breathing, 6 seconds in, 6 seconds out. What are some other places that people can start, or some exercises? I know that I've heard you share in the past different types of breathing. Maybe you could review some of those, like some of the different ways that we could do breathing. I've experimented with some of these and found it quite interesting, especially the one where you do some massage on the diaphragm. I'm like, oh, there's some like a little bit of tenderness up there. I think I need to like do a little bit more of this, and how that's actually been allowed me to have a deeper, more full breath and to
Mm-hmm.
not feel this restriction, which I don't know if I knew was there until I did.
Right.
So,
Yeah. So how about we go through a few different breathing techniques that people can use, and
yeah, that'd
I'll
be
I'll
great.
I'll talk through them. And
Okay.
I've got a great resource that I can share as well that I think will be helpful. So the first thing is we want to take our diaphragm through its full range of motion. So what I encourage people to do is just sit up in a nice comfortable position. You can also do this laying on your back if you want, and just keep your back flat so you can bend your knees so there's no strain or stress there. And what we're going to do is we're going to take a nice deep breath in, filling up our belly first, then our chest, then all the way to the top, keeping our tongue at the roof of our mouth, which is where it should be most of the day, and filling our lungs. And now we're going to let the air out with a relaxed exhale through our nose. And then now pushing the air fully out of our lungs, all the way out. Keep exhaling, keep exhaling, and then sit up nice and straight, but you're going to keep your lungs empty. And now you're going to hook your fingers like this with your lungs in that empty position and just kind of reach up underneath your rib cage and see if you feel any trigger points. And you can take another breath in if you need to. And then again, let it all the way out. And just when your lungs are empty, see if you can just kind of relax your abdomen and dig in underneath that rib cage, feeling for any tender spots. If you find a tender spot, just rub it in a circular fashion and you might even feel it release. So that's going to release the diaphragm. To strengthen the diaphragm, there's a really simple exercise we can do. It's called crocodile pose, where you lay on your stomach and you breathe into your belly. So you can keep your feet splayed, so your toes facing outwards, laying on your abdomen, and then your hands across the top of your head, just like this. And you're going to breathe into your belly. The resistance of your body weight is going to cause your diaphragm to face resistance and strengthen it over time. And if you can't lay on your stomach for any reason, then you can put some books on your stomach while laying on your back and breathing into the belly. And again, the books or your body weight will provide resistance. Just 2 minutes a day, that's going to work on strengthening the diaphragm. So those are two techniques that you can use. Another technique that you can use, you talked about this, Dr. Andy, is something called a buzz breath or bumblebee breath. This is where, with our tongue placed in the roof of our mouth, we take a nice deep breath in through the nose. And now when we're exhaling, we're keeping our tongue at the roof of the mouth and we're humming as loud as we can. So we want to feel the vibration in our throat as we exhale, but we also want to feel it in our face. Now imagine your pineal gland, which is a gland that sits right in the middle of your skull. Imagine you're vibrating that gland. What happens when we vibrate our face like this is it increases nitric oxide production. Humming also extends and lengthens the exhale. And as we know, when we lengthen the exhale, it puts us in a more parasympathetic state. So 3 to 5 breaths like this, and you're going to literally melt into the ground. It's such a relaxing way of breathing. And if you're doing it on your back, what I encourage people to do is just imagine themselves humming as loud as they can. And as they're doing that, they're just melting into the ground. That's the visual I want you to have. So doing this a few times, you're going to feel an instant sense of relaxation, but you're also going to get increased nitric oxide production. Another breath.
Can I really quick share
Yep.
something that I've actually done with this is at night when I'm in bed, getting ready, going to bed, I'll breathe and I'll kind of do an assessment of myself. I'll start with my head and I'll kind of slowly work down my body, just kind of giving space for what's the feeling there? What's the feeling in my head, my eyes, my throat, my chest? And what's really cool is if I feel any tension there or any, I would not call it discomfort, but if I just feel tension or even stress there, I found that this humming and kind of breathing in with that focus on whatever part of the body, my neck, chest, back, leg, that as I'm doing that and then humming, that area just resolves. And it's like, I think it's the focused attention, obviously, plus the breathing. And it's such a, I don't know, I just use the word beautiful, like that we have this gift that can be used in healing and in relaxing and just benefiting us. And it is so simple and yet it can't be that easy. Right. So
I love the way you put that. One more technique I'll show, which is called bellows breath. And if you've ever been to Tony Robbins, he does this, and this comes. I learned this from the Art of Living. And so, before I do that, there are some really simple breathing stretches that you can do to kind of open up the rib cage as well. So we don't just breathe into the belly; we also breathe into the rib cage. So first one is we're going to take our hands, put them together like this, thumbs in our rib cage. And
anywhere on the rib cage or up high?
On the lower ribs, on the false ribs.
Okay.
And we're going to take a nice deep breath in, pushing our rib cage outwards, expanding it outwards.
When you say pushing it outwards, like I think of pushing as like I'm trying to push it together, but like maybe I'm not.
You're expanding your lungs, and the lungs are going to push your rib cage. It's going to flare outwards like this.
Right.
Okay. So what you should notice is that your fingers should separate a little bit with every
Oh,
breath
I get
you
what you're
take.
saying. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I know you can't see me here. There we go.
Got it.
Okay. The next breath is up here, and the thumbs in the armpit. Fingers together just like that. A nice breath in through the chest. Wonderful. Expanding. Okay, we can take about 5 breaths there. And then the next place to put our hands is on the back of our neck, just like this. Really stretching that rib cage and breathing in. Nice deep breath in, a nice deep breath out, in and out through the nose. Feeling that rib cage expand. Feeling that chest and abdomen open up. Okay, so again, we can take about 5 breaths there. So this is going to help kind of wake up and expand the rib cage. And from here, let's do our next breathing technique, which is called bellows breath. So this is also known as yogic coffee. So if you need a boost, right, if you're listening to this in the afternoon, you need some energy or a jolt of adrenaline, but you don't want to drink caffeine or take any stimulants, then you can use your breath. Now, if you've got hypertension and it's not managed very well, then I wouldn't recommend this exercise because this will raise your blood pressure. And that's its intention is to do that. So what we're going to do is we're going to put our hands like this, make a gentle fist. So I've got my arms to my side. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to forcefully inhale through my nose, throwing my hands up in the air and opening up my palms. And then when I come down, I'm going to forcefully exhale through my nose, clenching my fist. Okay? So it's going to look and sound like this. Perfect. So really simple exercise. This you would do 30 times. And then you would take about a 15 to 30 second break in between the rep or in between the set. And then you would repeat that 3 times. And you're going to feel an instant jolt of energy when you do this. This is great in the morning if you wake up and you want to kind of start your day off right. You don't want to take any stimulants or you're feeling, hey, I need a little bit more energy. This is a great way to start the day off the edge of your bed. You're sitting at your desk. Of course, mind your neighbors and mind your desk. But this is a great way for you to kind of give your body that little wake up call that you need. And people feel instantly better. And if you've got a heart rate monitor, you'll see that your heart rate instantly goes up as a result of this, just as it would if you wanted to raise your adrenaline levels. So this will give you that jolt of energy that you're looking for when you need it.
I actually do this in the mornings as part of the priming I do with Tony Robbins, and it definitely does. It wakes you up, it enlivens you, and just again, if you don't want to take stimulants, which I don't like taking that stuff in, this is the stimulant. This is probably the best stimulant right here, right?
Well, it's true energy, right? Like
it is.
You're actually signaling your body using the breath. You're signaling your body to create the chemistry of excitement.
Yeah. Well, this has been awesome. I mean, I've learned a lot from this today, and I think the one thing that I am going to follow up on you with is every time I have this need to pick up the phone, nope, we're going to breathe, and just I'm really, for me, I want to see like what transformation happens within, because it's so easy to just pick it up, distract, nothing to do. So I'm going to follow up with you in like a week.
Okay.
And just let you know, hey, this is what I've experienced. But I really want to thank you for the time that you shared, the heart that you shared with us, because again, this is foundational to everything and could be what changes and really transforms someone's health on all levels, physical, spiritual, emotional. So this has been amazing, and just really appreciate your wisdom and humility and the things that you shared with us.
Well, thank you kindly for this opportunity. Thanks for asking such great questions. And here's to both of us, going beyond just scratching the surface and going deeper. And maybe we'll have another interview to bring back what we learn over the next few months with the audience.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Where can people find you? Where can people learn more about breathing? Because I know that you guide meditations, you do breath work all over the world. From what I know, Where can people find you?
Well, actually, I put together a great resource, an absolutely free resource for everybody. It's called my Ultimate Breathwork Bundle, and it's literally a no strings attached, series of tools and resources. I have a stop snoring guide in there. I've got a summary of all my notes from my retreat with James Nestor. I've got a fully guided 90-minute breathwork experience that you described earlier. I've got some keynotes that I've done. People can get access to the slides I've put together. I've got a breathing signatures guide. So I've kind of my wish is that as many people as possible learn how to leverage this tool, because I feel it's the fastest way for us to change people's lives. And everyone already owns the technology. We just have to teach them how to use it.
Right.
And so, so that's my gift to the world. And if they just go to breathworkwithsachin.com, they'll just enter their name and email information. And then over the next 5 days, I'll send them all the tools in an email.
Awesome. So, and that's SACHIN. So breathworkwithsachin.com.
Perfect. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, please, yeah, everyone, please take that, use it. And yeah, again, thank you so much. Appreciate you and everything that you're doing to help really change our I don't know what the word is, but just to bring about great change and help
Thank you.
people and help people. So
Thank you, my friend. Appreciate you.
awesome.